So on average, 8 out of 10 donors don't give again. That's 80% of donors don't give a second gift, and that's based on the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. And this is just an incredible stat that really surprised me, and really speaks to the challenge that charities and nonprofits face, where they get this one-time gift 80% of the time and don't hear from this donor again. And of course, some of that might be on the donor's end, but we want to do the best we can as charities, nonprofits, to speak to them, reach out to them, do our best to bring them into the fold and get that critical second gift, meaning that there's likely a relationship to continue on. And so right at the gate, I was thinking just maybe do a poll from you guys to see where you fall. And so you should see popping up on your screen. What is your, even if you don't know the exact number, but just kind of a guess, what percentage of your donors are, would you say, are one-time donors, or yeah, one-time donors? And the opposite, of course, the inverse would be the recurring donors. And so we have some options, basically the bottom third, middle third, or top third, and then a not sure if you're not quite sure where you fit in. Okay, so yeah, so probably pretty close to the stat that we quoted, 80% of donors just being one time. So we have the majority of us here on the actual webinar saying between 0 and 33% would be one-time donors. Between 34 and 66% are one-time donors, but none in that bracket where the average is, which is really good. And then a couple not sure. So thank you for dropping that in. Really good to see that the percentage of donors that are one time are fairly low and much lower than that average, which is good to see. But of course, as we think about these, even a third of donors being one time, to decrease that, to have more recurring, to get more of those donors to turn into partners is such a key. And specifically, we know why, but just to give you some stats. Number one, a recurring long-term partner has a higher lifetime value. So those monthly donors, they give 42% more per year than the one-time donors. That's from classy.org in 2023. There's a lower cost per acquisition, and this is true in the corporate space, of course. There's the much touted stat about how it's much easier to get a sale from a current customer than to go and find a new customer. And so that's true, of course, with charities and nonprofits. Bloomerang in 2022 posted that acquiring a new donor can cost 50 to 100% of the first donation, but retaining one costs only a fraction of that. And then, of course, the increased rates of engagement. Retained donors, those long-term partners, they're 3 times more likely to volunteer, advocate, refer others than the one-time givers from Donor Voice in 2021. And so, of course, I'm speaking to the choir, but it's really important to have those long-term partners get that percentage as high as possible and the percentage of one-time as low as possible, to make sure that there's that higher lifetime value, there's the lower cost per acquisition at the very start, and that there's increased rates of engagement. More volunteers, everyone could use more volunteers, that's for sure. Okay, so the solution is to turn some of these one-time donors, more of these one-time donors, into long-term partners. And that really is a frame of mind that I think has changed a lot in the charity nonprofit space over the last bit. Here are a couple of quotes of authors in the space speaking about how donors are not ATMs, they're partners in our mission. And that's Kay Sprinkle Grace, author of Beyond Fundraising. Beth Cantor says, smart nonprofits treat donors as partners and investors in impact, not just check writers. And again, we're speaking to the choir here. I know that everyone here believes that they're partners and part of the work that you're trying to do, impacting the world for the better. But just that making sure that that comes through and shines through to your donors is the most important thing. You might believe it, but what's important is that the donor needs to feel it. And so we're going to talk through a plan about how to make a donor feel like a partner, and that automatically leads to that second gift and a long-term relationship. And so the three stages that we kind of have, we like to break them down into three simple steps in our webinars. Thank donors, tell stories, and take feedback. Like a good preacher, we've alliterated. So thank donors, tell stories, and take feedback. And really, again, you'll see through this, the goal is to try to set up a form of or a medium of communication. So we're trying to thank donors, tell stories, we're communicating to the donor, but taking feedback is really key in hearing back from the donor and then investing in that. So starting that communication is really key. So let's jump into the first step, thanking donors. And I've kind of given a timeline for each one of them. So the thanking donors is the thing that we do right away. It's immediate. And obviously, almost all of you, I would guarantee, do this already, thanking donors. It's a really obvious thing to do. It's fairly easy to do in the digital space. But maybe we'll find some things within the thanking donors portion that could be improved or upgraded in your process. And so gratitude is the foundation of trust, and trust is what turns a gift into a relationship. And so that's really what we're trying to communicate to the donor is real personal gratitude. And we want to show appreciation by thanking our brand new donors in three ways: quickly, personally, and meaningfully. Quickly, personally, and meaningfully. So the quickly is fairly obvious. Obviously, the donor is giving, and you want to be as quick as you can to show that gratitude. And so thanking the donor within minutes of their gift really is ideal. The faster that thank you comes in, the stronger the emotional impact for the donor. And so there's definitely tools we'll talk about in a second to make this happen. But the quicker we can get to that donor, the better. We also want to make it very personal. So inserting the donor's name and the donor amount into that thank you letter is really, really important. We want to avoid generic language because that authenticity, it builds the trust. And there's ways to do that, of course, even beyond that quick automated email, but also like you could send a handwritten note, a personal phone call, or a thank you video. So there's other ways to personalize it and can be kind of a second wave of this thank you, because often the idea of quickly and personally can be at odds with each other. You want to make sure to get it out quickly, and sometimes that means email automation to get it out quickly. But by automating it, you can sacrifice some of the things like the personalization and the meaningfulness, which we'll talk about in a second. And so trying to do both and finding that perfect line between the two is really, really important. But doing that quick automated email helps, and then we can follow up with a handwritten note, personal phone call, or thank you video. And we're going to talk about a couple examples throughout this webinar that are really, really good examples, and probably ones you've heard of how they do this effectively. So quickly, within minutes possibly, with a quick follow-up as well, maybe a bit more personal, and then personally making sure that it's not generic, it's really personalized to the person receiving that thank you letter. And then finally, meaningfully. And this is really the key, the clincher. Sharing an impact story with that thank you is the best thing you can do. Specifically relating their gift to the impact story. And obviously not all the time can we instantly say, you know, this gift is going to this initiative or campaign. But if you can do that, that's really, really important. And again, we'll show some examples of how charities have been able to, other charities have been able to directly link a gift to a cause or an impact in a community or another community. And so that's really the way to make this meaningful. You want to use that thank you as a moment to reinforce your shared vision and speak through that why, the purpose story that you have. Um, Definitely do not ask for more money in the thank you letter. I don't think many would do that, but just try not to do that. You're using it just to reinforce your mission and to tell the impact that their gift gave. And so there's lots of tools out there. We're going to talk about kind of the digital tools available. Um, Email automation tools, if you're not using them, are incredibly helpful so that you're not, following up in Gmail or something later. There's tools like MailChimp where you can actually automate an email to go out, and you can use tags to insert the donor's name and the gift amount, and maybe even where they gave to, like what fund, so that it's really personalized to the impact they gave. Keela is another one, and there's a number of other free email automation options, but most would fairly easily add this kind of this drip campaign, the start of a drip campaign, or an automated email right at the start, just to send that out. And I'm betting most of you are already doing that. But if you're not, that's a great tool to get it out in minutes. Just make sure to use those tags to personalize it and add the impact in there so it's meaningful. Because of course that's one of the biggest touch points that you have with your donor. So that's the first one, thanking donors. One of the examples that I love is Charity Water. If you haven't heard of them, definitely check them out. And Scott Harrison is the founder of Charity Water. He wrote a book called Thirst, and I would highly recommend this if you haven't read it yet. There's also an audiobook you can listen to, which I'm a big fan of audiobooks. But Scott Harrison talks about really how he wanted the thank you to the donor to differentiate them from all other charities. And he really found that this was back when he started his charity, something that was totally missing, the connection as a donor, as a partner. He felt donors were being treated like ATMs, as we kind of thought about. And so he wanted to totally change the game in that way. And so they were immediately sending thank you letters to the donors. Early on, I believe it was like actually written out. But even now, if you gave to Charity Water, there'd be an instant reply, and you'll notice that it is personalized to you and also meaningful in that it will show your direct impact. But much greater than that, Scott really wanted to tie the project that they were giving to give water to communities without clean water around the world. And he wanted to tie those donors to the actual project so that they felt like partners, that they were part and parcel with that project in whatever community he was currently raising for. And so once the clean water actually arrived in that place, he would actually go back to the donors. It could have been, months or weeks or days before, and follow up and show them pictures and videos and stories related to their project. And you can actually see, if you go to Charity Water's website, you can see dots on a map where clean water was given to community. And so this is really important. Obviously, they had the instant thank you right away that kind of showed the impact of the donor and was personalized. But later, a much more personalized email out to the group of donors to a project to say, hey, look, these are videos, stories, and here's even a map of the spot in Google Maps where you impacted change. And so just a great example. Charity Water is a great example of all the things we're going to talk about, but a great example of the thank you and how it creates that partnership. It's not just the one-off donor transactional relationship. And here's a quote from Scott that I love from his book, Thirst. Instead of ignoring our donors, we intentionally remind them of their generosity, regularly thank them, recognize them, tell them how grateful we were. And this was in his book, just kind of telling a story. He's a great storyteller. But yeah, just a great example of using that thank you process and doing it often and regularly, really to create the partnership feel. Next up is step two, telling stories. And you'll know that I'm a huge fan of stories. We talk about this often, just because I feel like nonprofits and charities, you have a story to tell. It's so ingrained in who you are. And so using story in this process as well is really, really important. And we'll talk about how to use story strategically here. But here's a book that I've recently read through, Stories That Stick, and Kendra Hall talks about story being the language of the brain. And so this is really what we're trying to do: communicate, bridge a gap between the donor and us, and try to communicate the impact that they're having. And so we want to make our donors the heroes of a real unfolding story. And so the next step, I would say, after that thank you letter, and maybe even a personalized letter, is for the next few weeks telling impact stories. And these can be built into a drip campaign, which we'll talk about in a bit. But we want to tell stories that do three things in this process. Number one, show real impact. Number two, use relatable characters. And number three, reinforce that donor role. So we'll go through each one, but I think the first 8 weeks are so critical with that one-time donor, just to do all these things, really communicate that they are part of the story, that they're not only a part, but the key piece of the story, and that they are, yeah, the hero in the story. And so the first thing is showing real impact with these impact stories. And so using stories of individuals or communities that your donors have helped. It doesn't necessarily need to be the exact project that the donor would have given to. This is much more a drip campaign that could be automated, going out to all your one-time donors. But just using stories of individuals or communities your donors have helped, sharing those stories, going through that framework of a story, starting with a character and how they had a problem, that the donor, as the guide, came alongside with their donation and gave, and then there was a plan put in place, and the success of it. And so that's kind of the Disney story framework. Every story you hear and watch follows that framework of a character coming against a problem. A guide comes along, gives them a plan, and then they either succeed or fail. And of course, if it's a lovely Disney movie, it's always that succeed, and you get the gratification of the tension being resolved at the end. And so that's the goal with these stories as well, is to show a bunch of tension, but also see it resolve in a real impact stories. And these are stories of individuals and communities that you have helped with your mission. You want to highlight that personal transformation, not necessarily just a bunch of general stats about how you've helped, hundreds of people or dozens of communities, or one or two people. You really want to focus on names. You don't have to use exact names, of course, but as best you can, personal names, talk about personal transformation, emotional stories. And if you can, include photos, video, that kind of thing, really to speak to and give some color to it. So that's the first thing. We're using real impact stories in the first 8 weeks. These stories should use relatable characters, and this is a real key, is that you want your donor to see themselves in the mission and the vision. And so choosing those relatable characters that match the donor. For example, the donor might be a parent, or a child, or a student, or a farmer. And so, yeah, choosing those relatable characters that match the donor is really, really important. It's even maybe a bit more of an advanced approach might be segmenting your audience into these different types of donors: children, parents, students, farmers, just a few examples. Church leaders might be another. And then telling stories that are related or relatable to them. But you want that connection. You want them to feel like the character is related to them and that they can see themselves in that situation and see the transformation that happened. Um, yeah, so that's the second thing: real impact with relatable characters. And then finally, reinforcing that donor role. We want to frame the donor as the essential part of the story. For example, saying things like, "You helped bring hope to this community," or "You're a part of this change." It's not about our charity or our nonprofit. It's about the donor being the centerpiece of it. And they are the ones who help to bring that change. And by doing so, you're making them feel like they are part and parcel, that they're a partner long term in this engagement. And so we're focusing on the donor as the key piece of the story, the hero of the story. And so for tech in digital ways, I would suggest using drip campaigns through email marketing. We already talked about email automation for that first thank you message through MailChimp or Keela or any other email automation platform. So I would suggest using that first, but then after that, spending 1 to 8 weeks to really tell those impact stories. Bonnie asked a good example or a good question. Tell one story every 8 weeks or a different story each week. And it's totally up to you. I always answer these questions as like, because everybody's audience is different and everybody has a different, just a different target audience, it's important to kind of A/B test some of these things. But usually I would say if you can come up with enough stories to fill those 8 weeks, it would be really cool to tell a different story each time, but just from the point of view that that connects with that donor specifically. And so if you have, for example, 4 stories about farmers, you could do one every couple weeks to that farmer who's a donor. So as best you can with the available stories you have. So using drip campaigns through email marketing is really good. But another tool that might be interesting is remarketing ads. Now, these are available through Meta specifically, is the one that we would use most often. But using Meta ads is a really good way to reach out to people that have interacted with your content on your website or have donated or converted in some way. And so if your privacy bylaws allow it, you could run a remarketing campaign just to those one-time donors, not to the recurring, and just talk about, again, the impact that they've had. And it's just another touch point. This would show as like maybe a video or an image on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow them along for 60 to 90 days with that information. And you're trying to really bring them back to your website to give that second donation, knowing that that's the critical one to create that relationship. But telling those impact stories on Facebook and Instagram to the one-time donors is a really good way to kind of pull them back in and to remind them why they first connected with your organization in the first place. And yeah, and so that's the goal, to tell those impact stories and talk about how you're changing lives and impacting good throughout all the communities that you are, and really making a point of that. Charity Water is a great example of that. But here's another example, donorschoose.org. And if you don't know about it, it's a nonprofit platform that empowers public school teachers in the US to request funding for classroom projects, materials, and experiences. And my wife is a teacher in Ontario, Canada here, and this is definitely a need even in our areas for funding for materials and that kind of thing in classrooms. And so this was something that a teacher came up with, and in order to build that long-term loyalty, they would actually send, after each gift, photos, thank you notes, updates from the classroom. So the kids would actually write a bunch of thank you notes, send them to Donors Choose, and Donors Choose would send them over to all the donors. And that created this meaningful connection between the actual story, the kids being able to go on a trip or getting those resources, and the donor. And so this created full transparency. It created that story-driven approach, and was able to really turn those first-time givers into repeat donors. And if you look up Donors Choose, you'll see all these updates about how people really felt like partners in the story. They felt like they were giving directly to these children, and that Donors Choose kind of faded into the background. It was just a medium to get there. And such a really cool story about telling impact stories in a creative way in that way. And so there's an example for you of how that's done. Finally, taking feedback is the third one, and this is something for a little bit later in the process. But again, a quote for you. Kay Sprinkle Grace, author of Beyond Fundraising, says, "Donors want to be heard, not handled." And that's the goal of taking feedback. We want to create a space for two-way communication, actually listening to donors and hearing what they have to say, and letting them actually take action and shape our nonprofit or charity. And so here's the goal: is to collect feedback, asking the right questions, and then act on what you hear. And so we'll go through those three things, and then we'll talk about the tech and the tools to be able to do this. So collecting feedback, there's a number of ways to do this. You could do a survey post-donation, a quick poll in your newsletters, event comment cards, that kind of thing. But we're just always looking for input from donors. And we want to lower the barrier to participation. We're not giving out huge surveys with tons of questions, but 1 to 2 questions, or question formats, half a dozen questions. We're trying to really make it easy for people to give feedback, because if the barrier is just too high, there's not going to be a lot of responses. And then we want to ask the right questions. So focusing on experience, values, communication preferences, questions like what inspired your gift? What do you want to hear more about? These are things that shape how you communicate with the donor and what they want to hear, so that you're essentially allowing them to give you a bunch of ideas for your donor retention strategy. And this allows people to give feedback, and then we're going to act on it in a bit here. We want to, again, avoid asking for money in these communications. We're just showing interest in their perspective. And we want to use some open-ended responses. Notice how what inspired your gift is not something we could give like A, B, C, D options for. They're open-ended. And really read them, and I think it'll not only be helpful, but inspiring for you to read as you go. But the third one, and the most key piece of it, is acting on what we hear. So letting donors know that their feedback leads to change is really, really important. And so saying things later, like, you asked for more updates, so here's our new monthly story series. The feedback leads to action. And you can even acknowledge input, even if you can't implement it right away. This shows that you're listening, you're building trust, and you're strengthening that bond with the giver. And so this is definitely something that I think is a bit more challenging for nonprofits, charities that we've worked with. I don't know how many of you are actively doing this, but I think it's really good to create that partnership, because for a partnership, there's also that listening piece that sometimes we can miss as charities and nonprofits. And so there's a number of free tools that you can use. Google Forms, if you're part of the Google nonprofit program, Google Forms comes with your free subscription. And so that would be something to be able to use. I know MailChimp has surveys that you can build into it. SurveyMonkey, Typeform is another option. You can kind of Google these as you go. Or even you can use Instagram question boxes. That's a fun way to do it as well. In your story, you can just drop an Instagram question in there, hear from your donors, and then respond in a story later with the impact that they had on your changes. And so those are kind of the three steps that I would say as you're flowing along from day one to the end of month 4. Using drip campaigns and some of these automated tools can really help you to lower the time investment into it. But the first one is thanking immediately, personally, meaningfully. Second time is telling these impact stories for a few weeks, hopefully as aligned as you can with that donor. And then thirdly, taking feedback and then acting on it is really important. And this creates that partnership and the feel that they are part of the story. And so, as we usually do in the last few slides, just talking about no strategy versus strategy. And so, no strategy in the donor retention space looks like just kind of a standard generic automated reply after a donation. They get automatically signed up to these monthly newsletters, and there's no real impact. It's just a ton of information coming at them, kind of generic. And there's no real easy way to provide feedback. You might have like a contact form on your website, but beyond that, there's no real way for a donor to interact with you and give some input into the mission and the vision. And that would probably mostly result in one-time donors staying one-time donors. But a successful strategy would be thanking donors immediately, personally, meaningfully, telling those impact stories, taking feedback and acting on it. That would convert more of those one-time donors into long-term partners.